Forced adoptions, a yoga teacher that believed that she was Jesus, and children being given LSD. Sounds like Saturday night in California. Today, in our ongoing cult series, we'll take a look at a cult you probably never heard of unless you're Australian. Today, the family gets deep fat fried.
Deep fat fried!
The fucking family, huh?
Yeah.
Just the family, not the Manson family or the X, Y, or Z family, just the family.
The family, yeah. And there are a number of cults, actually, that have called themselves the family, smaller cults. It's a very, like, well-known kind of thing with cults that they try and replace people's families. And this one literally did it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, one of the things is that, a lot of people who join cults are, like, isolated people who've been alienated from others, ostracized, people with maybe like mental instabilities or something like that. And then they get sucked into these things because it's like, oh, well, here you can belong. Here you can be accepted,
Well, here in this instance, as we'll see, they got to their victims before they'd even developed the capacity to make those types of decisions. So
get them young.
Yeah, get them young. So, renowned as Australia's biggest cult, the family's grim history dates back to the early 1960s and is still believed to be active today, as I said.
Wow.
It had other names, too. They didn't just call themselves the family. They called themselves the Santa Caton Park Association and the Great White Brotherhood.
Okay.
And Hamilton-Byrne, pictured in kind of the corner here. The family's late cult leader and founder is infamous for the brutal torturing of at least 22 children on her property. She referred to her property as Up Top. From 1972 to 1987, many children were taken from their parents in adoption scams. 14 of the children had their hair regularly bleached, as we see here, to be peroxide blondes. They were all dressed identically, as you can see. And they were given her surname. They were whatever Hamilton-Byrne.
Weird. This is weird as fuck.
Yeah.
I have a large family now, TJ. They all love me and obey me.
And as you can see, others were left with auburn hair, which was Anne's natural hair color. None of them were ever told that they were adopted. They all believed that they were Anne's naturally born children. Anne Hamilton-Byrne believed that she was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ and got her children to believe that by having them go through a complex LSD ritual at 14 years of age.
Well, I guess life in the cult's not all bad.
Yeah, you get a little free LSD trip out of it.
Free LSD,
Her creed was a hodgepodge of world religions and miscellaneous esoterica, including UFOs. Really common for cults to do that, take a little snatches of other world religions and weave in, kind of like this metaphysical shit.
Right. Well, it's an in, like you got someone's interested in UFOs. Hey, you know what fucking addresses UFOs? My crazy fucking cult.
Yep.
Oh, you've heard of fucking Catholicism, huh? Well, we got some of that shit in my cult.
Yeah, you got to hook people in. I mean, obviously here, there was not much of a hook even needed, really.
But even with those, this cult in particular hinged mostly on just her personal charisma.
Right.
Her sermons, like a lot of cult leader sermons, are pretty unintelligible to the uninitiated in the cult. You'll find that that's the case in Scientology as well. It's purposefully obtuse, has a lot of in-language. So listening to one of her speeches is like listening to gobbledygook. She collected 10% of her followers' incomes. She had amassed a fortune, including homes in Britain and New York, while encouraging them to engage in frauds, forgeries, spousal swaps, and more scam adoptions.
Pretty aggressive strategy for her cult.
Yeah, for sure. By the time Anne Hamilton-Byrne rose to power as a cult leader with a small army of followers, she'd amassed a fortune and adorned herself in fine clothes and jewelry. She looked more the part of an urban socialite than a pseudo-religious leader, and her position of influence and wealth was a long way from the small farming settlement a few hours outside of Melbourne where she grew up. Born as Evelyn Edwards in 1921, young Anne's mother died in an asylum after being diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. Because her father had trouble holding down a job and wasn't up to the task of being a single parent, Hamilton-Byrne spent much of her childhood in and out of orphanages. So might explain why she's so obsessed with adopting children. You know, I included this little blurb about her early life because I think you can trace a path. You can see the beginnings of her ideology and the way that she was raised, right?
Right, of course. Plus, I mean, the fact coupled with like you're adopting a bunch of children, and like you said, they believe that's their mom. I mean, if you're gonna get someone to do something, it's gonna be really convincing to a child, especially like my mom wants me to do this scam, or they want me to do this thing. And it's not like just like some person like that's convincing you off the street. Basically, it's like your parent telling you like you got to do this.
Yeah. After giving birth to a single child and then losing her husband in a car accident, Hamilton-Byrne began to immerse herself in yoga. What followed was anything but a typical budding career as a yoga teacher. So first, she made a very powerful friend. This is Rainer Johnson. He was the master of the Methodist Queen's College, the University of Melbourne. Very few in Australia were college educated at the time of his tenure between 1934 and 1964. So he had significant influence on many of Australia's judges and doctors. They all kind of a lot of them came through his school.
Because you don't have a lot of college educated people. So, you know, if you're very high up in the school, you've just instantly made connections with a shit ton of powerful people.
Right. And he used those. Tons of highly educated people in the country where, like I said, there was not much higher education to speak of amongst most people, meant that people in position of power all knew this guy. In 1961, a yoga teacher named Anne Hamilton-Byrne showed up unannounced at the home of Dr. Rainer Johnson. The two had never met before, but over the course of tea, Anne was able to convince Rainer, a distinguished psychologist, that she was a spiritual being who could see into the future. So once again, speaking to her charisma, right?
Right. And also, I mean, like, just like, you know, this is a great example of, like a confidence hustle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's known what techniques she used in this instance to get this guy on board, but, you know, more than likely, flattery probably played a big part. And also just like, you know, the desire for this guy to be big and important. Maybe she saw something to that effect in the future. Oh, you're going to be this great, you know, this great man, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. It's like, wow, yeah. You know? But I don't know what exactly she said, but
nobody does.
But that's pretty fucking fun.
Yeah. He owned a huge property called, I'm going to try my best with this, Santiniketan, or Abode of Peace. At a place called Ferny Creek in the Dandadong Ranges. Dandadong Ranges outside of Melbourne. There, he hosted regular meetings of a religious and philosophical discussion group led by the yoga teacher, Anne Hamilton-Byrne. The group consisted of middle-class professionals. It had been estimated that a quarter were nurses and other medical personnel, and that many were recruited by Johnson, who referred them to Hamilton-Byrne's Hatha yoga classes. So she had the connections to get to people that had money, and thus the hustle was kind of established.
I can see the future. I wonder if the reality is that she just like went to this guy and was like, look, I got a scheme, but I need some legitimacy. Give me your legitimacy. I'll cut you in.
Like I said, only they know the true contents of those early meetings and discussions between themselves. It does sound a little far-fetched that a well-educated psychologist is convinced over the course of one conversation that spirituality exists and that this woman is some kind of god on earth or whatever.
I mean, like money in a scheme. That's a lot more convincing.
But, you know, I mean, hey, you know, it's not impossible either. Like,
no,
there's definitely,
no.
I mean, there have been some very intelligent people who have believed some very ridiculous things. So,
too true. So during the late 60s and the 70s, New Haven Hospital in Kew or Q, was a private psychiatric hospital owned and managed by Marion Villamek, a Santaniketan member. So one of the people that got funneled into these yoga classes and spiritual discussions. Many of its staff and attending psychiatrists were also members. Many patients at New Haven were treated with the hallucinogenic drug LSD. The hospital was used to recruit potential new members from among the patients, and also to administer LSD to members under the direction of the Santaniketan psychiatrist John McKay and Howard Whitaker. One of the original members of the association was given LSD, electroconvulsive therapy, and 2 lobotomies during the late 60s. I didn't even know you could do 2 of those. The hospital was a useful tool for Anne to control her cult members. Those speaking out against her were threatened with being committed to the hospital. Anne even had the wife of a man she was interested in committed until she gave in and signed divorce papers, allowing Anne to marry him. So she really used these and somehow had sway over these people in high positions so that she could basically use this psychiatric institution as like retribution against her enemies.
I mean, the more that she's able to accrue, the more easy it is for her to use her power. Like,
sure.
It all it took was she makes one influential friend. He funnels other, in a key position with lots of connections. He starts funneling influential people her way. Before you know it, she's drowning in money and she has control of this hospital. And, she's able, if you control a fucking psychiatric hospital and you can fucking commit people at will, there's no limit to what you can fucking accomplish at that point. Because no one wants to be committed.
Well, TJ, like imagine you have a dispute and then like you're a bunch of guys in white suits show up, fucking throw you in a goddamn psychiatric ward, and it's like, all right, TJ, no, I just had to sign over the deed to your house to me. Think about this. Like, how does the state control you? Like, oh shit, you fucking violate our rules, you're going to prison.
Right.
How does Scientology control it? Oh, you violate our rules, you're gonna go on the fucking the hate boat or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, you don't want to go on that boat.
You're going on the spooky boat where, people don't hear from you for a long, long fucking time,
Never again. Yeah.
Right.
So, having a control of a legitimized psychiatric institution where you could just have people lobotomized or do whatever the fuck you need to do to control them. That's like, you got your fucking, your carrot on a stick. You got the carrot and you got the stick. This is definitely the fucking stick, like, oh yeah, you're going to go into this fucking place. We're going to fucking lobotomize you twice and electroshock you and shit. It's going to be real bad.
Fucking nuts. Yeah. Like, no, I'm going to sign.
You love your husband, do you? Well, I love him more. So sign the divorce papers, bitch, because he's mine now.
Yep. So this man that she basically stole by having his wife committed and then forcing her to sign divorce papers to get out was her partner, Bill, that she adopted all these children that we'll talk about with. They were stolen children. They had rituals involving psychedelic drugs and torture, and they were all part of her plan to create this master race for a war that hadn't yet begun that she claimed she saw coming.
The master race backdrop, the impending race war, is always seems like it's a very successful control mechanism. Charlie Manson used it,
seems to speak to a lot of people, maybe paranoid personality types and such.
Hitler kind of used it, if you really,
Oh yeah, of course he did.
Yeah, to obvious.
The
success.
60s, that was all over the news too. That was like those were like big international news stories. So
race war, race war. It's happening.
So once they had established themselves as kind of amongst the elite of Australia, it was easy for them to adopt children. At the time, Australia had a policy of forced adoption that was so severe that they eventually issued a national apology for it. Single mothers were seen as unfit, given little to no aid from the government. Coupled with the fact that many medical and other professionals were members of her cult, the process was streamlined to Anne to obtain just about any child she wanted. She would just have the mother declared unfit or the father declared unfit for whatever reason, and there was really no mechanism in the Australian government to oversee this. And if what little there was were all friends of hers in her weird yoga cult. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it basically allowed her to go to the hospital and go like, nope, that baby's coming with me and that one right there. You know, and imagine being a parent. You send your baby off to get cleaned up and swaddled and fed so you can rest. And then when you wake up from your rest after giving birth, you find out like, oh, you're an unfit mother and your kid's been adopted.
Yeah. Sorry, a cultist is taking your baby. Don't worry. She'll be in good hands.
A family midwife and obstetrician would deliver the baby, refer it to a family social worker, and force the mother to sign away the rights to her child. So I guess it was a little more complex than that, but same kind of strong arm tactics and shit. So family lawyers and such were able to get birth certificates changed to make it harder for the child and natural mother to be reunited. The children were convinced that they were all brothers and sisters, isolated from the outside world. The children of the family grew up under the strict supervision of cult members known as the aunties, who often starved them and beat them. Even when she was traveling overseas, Anne would call home to Up Top to hear the children be disciplined over the phone. The psychological manipulation was intense. If a child stepped out of place, food would be withheld, or even worse, Hamilton-Byrne would lay into them with one of her stiletto heels. So I guess she was known for beating them with her shoes.
Wonderful.
And starving them if they stepped out of line.
Oh, you have a difference of opinion? Let's see if you eat this week.
Not a great recipe for a master race, by the way. Starvation and beating. That'll make them tough.
I mean, I wouldn't know how to start a recipe for a master race. You know what I mean? It sounds like a inherently flawed proposition from the jump.
I mean, I can tell you this: depriving them of like vital nutrition during their developmental years is not a great recipe.
Probably.
I can't tell you how to do it, but I can tell you how not to do it.
I'm gonna starve you and beat you and psychologically torture you. You're gonna be the master race.
Yeah, you're gonna be awesome. You're gonna be the ultimate fucking warrior when this is all done. It's like, what? No, I don't think so. Pretty sure you're gonna create a race of fuck ups.
If the beatings and starvation weren't enough, the children were regularly given doses of various psychiatric drugs that were provided by this network of family psychiatrists that they had.
Yeah, the hospitals they have.
To keep them docile until they turned 14. When they turned 14, they'd be given large amounts of LSD and told by Anne Hamilton-Byrne once they were all peaking that she was Jesus Christ. So she would get them all fucking frying balls as soon as they turned 18. And then she would appear to them and go like, I'm not actually your mother. I am Jesus. So anybody that's ever tripped acid or mushrooms knows that you can be incredibly suggestible on a large dose of those drugs, suggestible to other people's moods, suggestible to things that people say. And if you're a child who's been abused your whole fucking life and kept doped up most of your life, you can imagine your ability to resist this is pretty much none. You just think, you know, because she dosed them. She didn't tell them they were taking LSD.
Yeah, it's just like you suddenly feel strange, and it's like, I'm Jesus, and it's like, wow, this is a supernatural experience to you, or some like.
Right. Well, they're kept isolated and shit, you know. So there's really not much of a basis. You have no. I mean, you've been indoctrinated your entire life up to that point to be like submissive to this institution. So, you know, all of a sudden they're just like, we're escalating to the next level. You're gonna have this profound spiritual experience in this room where you're gonna go and you're gonna fucking, you know.
I mean, who wouldn't be fooled by this, TJ? If you had never taken acid, you suddenly felt different, and me or Paul appears and like, TJ, I am just a descendant of Zeus, and you were just like, oh my god, what the fuck? Like you might believe it, even you.
Paul
you
is
you have no fucking baseline. You have nothing else to fucking compare against. So it's like, and like Paul said, they got a hot dose. They didn't even fucking know they were taking LSD. Like if I felt that way, I mean, I don't think there's almost anyone that could resist that. Not knowing.
I mean, hey, this once again, I hate to point out another similarity between this chick and Charles Manson, but he also used LSD to pry open, you know, to like kind of implant suggestions in the minds of his followers. You know,
absolutely. Right. So the ceremonies went something like this. They were given this huge dose of LSD. They got left alone in a room for a period of time. The only people that would visit them were Hamilton-Byrne or one of the cult's psychiatrists. Some of the children were molested during these visits. Anne would eventually walk in wearing white robes, accompanied by a smoke machine to complete the illusion.
Right. So she comes in decked out in white. There's a smoke machine playing. The smoke machine filling the room with fucking ethereal smoke. It's got to look fucking crazy on acid. I'm sure the lighting situation in the room is such that,
sure, she's
going to look like this resplendent fucking supernatural presence that has just entered the room,
This picture out here is actually pretty good. It might approximate what some of them were seeing,
It's like, whoa. And I'm sure they're having this profound fucking like experience of like, oh my God, I feel the spiritual energy, the power of this moment,
Yep.
Right.
For a few years, Anne Hamilton-Byrne developed a connection to the Siddha yoga movement, or Siddha yoga movement, receiving Shaktipat initiation from Swami Muktananda, who's pictured here. Muktananda. Got it. Pictured here. And she took the Sanskrit name Ma Yogi Shakti. She took some of the children to stay with Muktananda at his ashram at South Fallsburg, New York, later known as the Sri Muktananda Ashram, in the Catskills Mountains in 1979 and 81. And she purchased a nearby property as her own base in the U.S. Sarah Hamilton-Byrne tells how Muktananda would give a private audience, or darshan, once a week to Hamilton-Byrne's group. He once asked the children if they would like to leave the family and live with him at his Gurudev Siddha Peeth ashram in Ganeshpuri, India. The children all gave him an enthusiastic yes, but were later punished by Hamilton-Byrne for disloyalty. She states that Hamilton-Byrne eventually caused a lot of trouble in the Sri Muktananda ashram. Some of Muktananda's devotees defected to the family. Sarah was present when Swami, whatever, I can't even do it, Tejo Mayanand. Yeah, Swami Tejo Mayanand was initiated into the family. She states that she could not understand why he would want to join a sect where everyone was so miserable when it seemed everyone around Muktananda was so happy. So even she knew, like, she didn't really have a good sales pitch,
We're watching the Cult Wars on this episode of Cult Wars.
Yep.
These two cults.
Now this could be a fucking show. These two cults fucking vying for members. Like, come on, my cults. People in my cult are way happier.
Look, they're smiling.
Would you kids like to come live with me? Yes. No, bad kids. Bad. I'm Jesus, not him.
Only you get brainwashed by me. You don't get brainwashed by him.
Have you already forgotten the LSD brainwashing I gave you?
Oh, ma'am.
Like many cults, the children of other cult members had little contact with the outside world. It was all part of the family's motto, which is unseen, unknown, unheard.
Keep it on the DL, y'all.
Yep. However, that motto would come to an end in 1987. Hamilton-Byrne's doomsday cult, known as the Family, would amass a following of nearly 500 members before it finally unraveled because of one rebellious teenager.
Uh-oh.
Sarah Hamilton-Byrne was expelled by her adopted mother in 1987 because of arguing and rebellious behavior. With the support of a private investigator and others, she then played an instrumental role in bringing the family to the attention of the Victoria police. As a result, a raid took place at Kai Lama on Friday, 14th of August, 1987, and all the children were removed from the premises. Sarah later went on to study medicine and become a qualified doctor, so good for her. She also learned that she'd been adopted and eventually met her biological mother. After the raid in 1987, Anne Hamilton-Byrne and her husband William remained outside Australia for the next 6 years, kind of on the lam.
They're like, all right, we out. We out. We ain't fucking with this right now.
So Operation Forest was an investigation involving police in Australia, the UK, and the US, and it resulted in their arrest finally in June 1993 by the FBI. They were living in Hurleyville in the Catskills in New York. They were extradited to Australia, charged with conspiracy to defraud and commit perjury by falsely registering the births of 3 unrelated children as their own triplets. charges that were later dropped. So
all
all
this
this
anything to do
fucking
with all of her high-profile connections with
Right.
judges and lawyers and other legal professionals and stuff.
so all this like multinational fucking manhunt, and she goes back to a place where she basically owns the, like she's in the pocket of every person that could do her harm. The Hamilton-Byrnes pleaded guilty to the remaining charge of making a false declaration, and they each received a $5,000 fine.
All right, you guys, you brainwashed a bunch of kids and you fucking molested them and gave them LSD, and you fucking, locked a bunch of people up, falsely imprisoned people, gave them lobotomies and shit. So prepare. No, I don't want to do this too hard, so, just keep your wrist still, okay? Okay. Oh, sorry, that was a little hard. I'm sorry about that, but you're free to go. You're free to go. Oh my God.
I can't believe it. Rich, powerful cocksucker somehow got out of it, huh?
Shocking.
Yeah, you know what? I can't believe it. Dude, I think the only reason they even taken down a little bit was the government was just too worried. Like, they got too many followers. Just go in there and clean some of the followers out.
Yep.
They'll have to leave the country for a few years, and it'll be real bad. Whatever. I mean, like, that's all they did. It's like you've seen this with the government before, because honestly, it's like you see like shit like Waco. It's like they don't want to have shit like that, or maybe Waco happened after that. I'm not sure, but all I know is that they just don't want competition. So they're fine with these people operating. It was just when they got too big. I'm sure that's all it was. Like, oh, they're too big now. They have too much influence.
Too big.
So they received no prison time, and as we demonstrated, not a tippy tap on their wrist. They were a wealthy couple, so clearly they, $5-10 was like nothing.
Nothing.
Police estimated in the 80s that her fortune could be as much as $50 million. So yeah, 10 grand is like, whatever. You lose that in a couch cushion or whatever.
Reach for my wallet.
Other cult members were also convicted of defrauding the government for tens of thousands of dollars. Some lower cult members and stuff were convicted. In August 2009, 2 individuals received financial compensation from Anne Hamilton-Byrne after suing her. Her granddaughter, Rebecca Cook Hamilton, sued her in 2007 for alleged psychiatric and psychological illnesses. She alleged that she received cruel and inhuman treatment from Hamilton-Byrne and her servants, including beatings, being locked in a freezing shed overnight, and being forced to take weird medications. She also alleged that she was given insufficient food. And she was awarded an estimated $250,000. A former member of the family, Cynthia Chan, alleged that she paid the sum of like $352,000 to Hamilton-Byrne for real estate in Olinda, Victoria, but the property was never transferred to her. She also alleged she paid the sum of $70,000 and change to Hamilton-Byrne for another property, but this too was never transferred.
Why would you do it? Don't do it twice.
Maybe it was done at the same time. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe it was a simultaneous.
Hamilton-Byrne claimed she had no memory of the matter, and Chan's judgment was estimated at $250,000. So if she was telling the truth, she didn't get her money back.
She recouped some of it, but not all of it.
Authors of a book on the family, Jones and Johnson, spent time with a man named Michael who claimed the family is still a going concern. He said he visited Anne nearly every day in her nursing home, and that the group still held weekly meetings at their headquarters, the Santinaketan Lodge in the Dandenong Ranges. But both authors find that hard to believe. I think it's probably 30 or 40 people in the hills at most, says one of them. And I don't know how active they are, but there are certainly people that still support Anne. After suffering from dementia for years and being cared for by one of the family children, Anne Hamilton-Byrne passed away at 98 years old at her nursing home in Melbourne. If there's an epilogue yet to come in the story, it's still the looming legal contest over Hamilton-Byrne's substantial estate, valued in the multiple millions, which is sure to flare up in the wake of her passing. So this is all still pretty recent. And she got to basically live her entire life and die comfortably and cared for.
Yep. By one of the people she brainwashed, too.
Yep.
Because it was like she was cared for by one of her many children, who obviously was still very much under her spell.
Dude, now the next one up for the scam, dude. Let's just be honest. I mean, it's just the next up in the scam line. It's like, you seem like, oh, she's getting old and started slipping. I've always cared for you. Remember me, grandma or mom? I love you. Yeah, you sign over all the papers to me. That's right.
A lot of these cold stories end with like at least a somewhat satisfying conclusion. Like the Nixium guy is in jail. You know, L. Ron Hubbard, I guess, got away with it. So
yeah, but you know what she did right that most of these other cults have done wrong. Like she made one critical move that just put her ahead of all those other people. She fucking hooked up with like the elite of the elite. You know what I mean? Like she got the judges and the fucking, she got the judges in her pocket. I mean, really, like you got the judges. Like what's anyone gonna fucking do? Like Australia, I mean, like the fucking setup, Australia at the very time had, like they said, had very few college educated people. And most of them were going through a college that she fucking had her fucking hooks into. So, I mean, like her power at that point is like, it's not going away. And then the more fucking she collected 10% of all of her little fucking cult members' incomes, the more fucking she became extravagantly wealthy and the more untouchable she became,
Yep.
And honestly, if she hadn't kicked out that one rebellious fucking daughter of hers, probably wouldn't even have fucking amounted to what it did. Probably still be going strong to this day,
It actually might be. Like that's the thing.
Maybe it still is. That's true. Like we don't even know.
You remember what was their creed? Unseen, untold, unheard, or whatever. Just so there are people that wrote this book about the family that say that like, oh, it's probably just 20 or 30 people up in the mountains somewhere. But maybe it's 150 or 200. Wrong. Yeah, like who knows? Like their whole thing is secrecy and not talking to people outside of the group and yada yada. So this could still be a way larger problem in Australia than people may think. So no happy ending on this one.
Guess not.
That's what I got for you, though. If you liked it, let us know. We'll do some more cult episodes for you.
Sounds good.
Deep fat fried. Deep fat fried.